All right, thank you everyone for having me. Thank you Checkpoint for having me out today to talk to you a little bit about the evolving role of the CISO in a post-breach organization. So I'm going to kind of start out and just introduce you guys to the company that I work for. I work for a company, a grocery retailer that's primarily located in the Midwest in St. Louis called Schnuck Markets. Now, we're relatively big, but we come from humble beginnings. We were founded in 1939 by, I think we refer to her at the company as Grandma Schnuck. We're a third-generation family-owned company. We operate 100-plus stores and pharmacies. So we have a large amount of credit cards that go through our systems. We're also offering a lot of prescriptions to our pharmacy customers. We operate in 5 states. Like I said, primarily Missouri and urban St. Louis area, but we're also in Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And we have over 14,000 teammates. Everybody's a teammate at Schnucks. We don't really do contractors, and that's part of the family culture that we try to drive at Schnucks. Whether you're the bagger or you're the CEO, you're part of that one team of merchants. We're actually the country's 17th largest privately owned grocer. We have a commitment to nourishing people's lives. This is something that our CEO makes very clear every time that he addresses the company. We are operating under the vision of nourishing people's lives. We want whenever people to come into our stores to feel like they have a one-on-one relationship with our clerks, with our teammates, so that they're getting the best food, the best value, and the best prices for their time that they spend in our stores. It's a very, very competitive industry in grocery. We have a lot of competitors. And so we operate in a way where we're really trying to bridge that gap of just, I hate grocery shopping, to come into Schnucks, you're going to find that we're friendly and that you have the right products that you need at the right price in the right location. So while we are local, and like I said, primarily located in St. Louis, our cyber threat is just as global as anyone else's is here in this room. So my title was The Evolving Role of the CISO in a Post-Breach Organization. That indicates that something happened to Schnucks. So while I can't really go into a lot of the details about how this happened, I can tell you what you could still to this day search on the internet and find out about the event, as we now call it, at Schnucks. So Schnucks was victims of a very large point-of-sale attack. We're going back in time now. I'm taking back to the end of 2012, the end of December 2012. A hacker got into the Schnucks systems and began harvesting credit card data from point of sale. By March 2013, there was an incredible amount of media activity related to this story. Now, again, Schnucks is this homegrown, family-owned company, very involved in St. Louis, very involved in the community, and at this moment in our company's history time, we were dirt. Our name was dirt. The media was destroying the company. I hadn't yet gotten employed by Schnucks. At this point in time, I was working for MasterCard, which their technology center is also located in the St. Louis area. So I was close to this event, not necessarily as somebody who really thought much about Schnucks, but more like I was a customer. This was affecting me. So March, April, May of 2013, it was an absolute media firestorm for Schnucks. And just as a customer, I remember sitting on the couch watching St. Louis Cardinal games, and the CEO would come on TV of Schnucks and just ran an ad just apologizing. Now, you got to recognize, we're going back to 2013. This is before Target and Home Depot. There was not really a playbook, particularly for retail merchants, on how to respond to this type of thing. So I think you could debate, and we're not going to get into that, whether or not Schnucks responded to this event well or not so well or whatever, but it was literally something that crippled this company right to the edge, right to the brink of potentially going out of business. This was a big, big deal. When it was all kind of said and done, the reports came in, approximately 2.4 million credit and debit cards were stolen from our systems. So let's kind of put that into a little bit of perspective, right? 2.4 million. There's 318,000 people in the city of St. Louis. 2.4 million cards. So basically, in essence, the Schnucks data breach caused the reissuance of the entire city of St. Louis, or actually the entire city of St. Louis credit cards. Again, this was a big deal. 2.4 million credit and debit cards stolen. That's about 1/3 the size of the entire state of Missouri. So while many of you maybe haven't heard of Schnucks unless you're from the Midwest, it was a huge, huge event for a relatively big company in that area. And they looked at this and they said, this is really detrimental. We need to start thinking about things differently. And what I really appreciate about Schnucks, and I started to kind of pick up on this during my interview process as they were looking for a CISO, someone to come in and help mature the security posture of this organization after this event happened. What really attracted me to this company and the company leaders was that they decided that this event will not define us. This event is a blip in time, and rather than letting this event define us and being all sad and being all down about it, we're going to make this our finest hour. We're going to turn this event into something that not only are we going to learn from it, we're going to go out and start to talk to other retailers and other companies and say, this is what we've been doing, and here's what we're doing to push ourselves to get better. It's this exact reason why I'm able to be here to talk to you today, is because the company allows me to do that, because we still want to go out there and nourish people's lives, like I said, and this is a way that we can do it in our industry. So I really tip my hat to leaders at Schnucks for letting us do these things, because we can get out there and we can be public about it. We know that it happened. We're not hiding that it happened, but it happened. So let's talk a little bit about, not necessarily why it happened, but where I sort of believe all companies kind of sit in what I would call an information security journey. Now, this is a kind of a timeline where we look at where every single company is on a spectrum of information security maturity. I think we could argue, and this is, I had some friends from Optiv, formerly Accuvant and Fishnet, came in and we kind of whiteboarded this idea out. When we said every company, regardless of your industry, at some point is somewhere on the spectrum of security maturity. And many companies, particularly maybe larger retailers who have a very big PCI focus or PCI risk, are very compliance focused, because PCI drives that compliance framework, right? So every company, regardless of your industry, I'm going to argue that you're somewhere on this. So everyone in this audience, your company is somewhere on this spectrum of maturity level. And I came into Schnucks and I said, all right, we've been a very compliance-focused security organization leading up to this point. What I want to do as the CISO is start to move that needle away from compliance. And let me just be very clear, and I've given variations of this presentation before. Compliance is not a bad thing. It is not a bad thing, and I don't want that to come across wrong where I'm kind of dogging on compliance, because I'm not. Compliance is a great thing. But keep in mind, it's the bare minimum security level that you're required to do. It is the bare minimum. What we need to do as security leaders, and what my message to Schnucks was whenever I came in, and as they were looking for someone to come in and help mature their team, was let's move that needle from being a compliance-based, compliance-focused organization, and let's start moving our focus to becoming business-aligned. And how do we get there? We get there by start to addressing and understanding what our threats are, what our threats in our industry are, what are our risks, what is our risk tolerance as a company. No longer do we need to be focusing on checkbox compliance and making sure that our PCI auditor is happy. Let's start by moving the needle towards business alignment. So here's really the main point that I want to make today. I want folks to kind of walk away from this talk and have maybe a better understanding of the difference between compliance and security. Because while they do go hand in hand, they are very different. And so this was the misconception that I believe Schnucks made, and many other retailers and other companies make, as the video showed. This continues to keep happening. The misconception is that if compliance is good, and again, I'll say it again, compliance is a good thing. It really is a good thing. But if compliance is good and security is good, then that must mean compliance equals security. And the problem that I take with compliance frameworks is that you're going to get your report, and it's going to say, whenever you're done, you've done all these changes, you've made all these actions to listen to your auditor, and at the end of the day, you're going to sign off as a CISO or the CIO or whoever, and you're going to sign your PCI compliance report. That's going to go up your chain of command, and ultimately it's going to land on the desk of your CEO or your board, and they're going to look at that, and what are they going to do? Now remember, they don't really know technology, they don't necessarily know security, but they're looking at this report and going, oh, okay, cool, we're good. why am I going to want to continue to invest in a security program where I have a report here that says we're good? I'm going to go invest in something that I think's got a little bit better ROI instead of security, right? So this is a huge misconception, and I think it's where compliance has opportunity to step up and start taking some lead, and like, let's not allow the boards of these companies to fall into that trap where they begin to believe that this report means I'm good, therefore I don't have to worry about security until next year when we're due for another compliance report. This is a detrimental misconception, and I believe that it's what a lot of companies are, the mistakes that companies are making. Now, when I worked at MasterCard, the last year and a half that I was there, the first 5 years that I worked at MasterCard, I was running their computer security incident response team. And I did that for 5 years, and we investigated a lot of different potential breach events and other events and investigations that we had internally. But the last year and a half, I took a promotion into a team that they called Account Data Compromise. And on Account Data Compromise, our job was, it sounded really cool. I didn't love it, which is ultimately kind of maybe why I left. But we had an opportunity where we would get all of this data from all the issuing institutions. So people like you and me, if we ever have a fraudulent charge on our credit card, what do? We call that 800 number on the back of our credit card. We report it to our credit card issuer. Now, the issuers have agreements with the card brands that whenever these complaints come in, now they settle it up with you, they're gonna notify the card brands of that information. It's really interesting because you get a ton of data coming into the large card brands, particularly MasterCard and Visa for the United States, where we have so many transactions that are made up of those two particular card brands. And what we were able to do on the Account Data Compromise team, and I was one of the lead investigators on that team, is we were able to take all of this data and we were able to say, what's in common here? There's all these complaints of fraud. What's in common? And we would start to look, and we would go, oh, that's interesting. Every single one of these complaints, they've all shopped at Schnucks or Target or Home Depot. So we had this like first line. We knew with a great deal of certainty whenever merchants were breached. So ultimately what we would end up doing is we would work with the other card brands, the merchant who was in question, and we would get a forensic investigation team out to the company. They would go and they would identify that, in fact, our analysis is true. You are breached. You're leaking credit card data or what have you. And their job was basically tell MasterCard and tell the other card brands the timeline. We want to know when they were breached, and we want to know when it was contained. And then at MasterCard, we would take those two dates, and we go, okay, we know it was from this date to this date. We would combine all those cards. We'd get every single card that processed at that merchant between this date and this date, and then we would go tell the issuers back about it. Here's your cards at risk, issuer. Now go do whatever you want with them. You can reissue that plastic. You can put in fraud alerts for those customers. Technically, they could do nothing if they wanted to, but that was our job. And we had a list miles long of merchants that we knew were breached at this moment. So, of course, at my time when I was at MasterCard, Schnucks was one of these, and we worked that case just like we worked every other case. And I kind of thought not really a big deal, having no idea that at some point I was going to transition into the CISO role there. But with every single one of those reports, and I'm not kidding, every single one of those reports that we looked at, the merchant came back to MasterCard and Visa and the other card brands, and they would go, I don't understand how this happened. We were PCI compliant. I have a report right here that says we're PCI compliant. And then what do the card brands say? They go, well, the PCI compliance is a stamp in time. You were PCI compliant on this date, but then maybe you made a firewall change, and then it gets into this whole thing. So there's the misconception that I'm trying to drive here. The compliance framework, while it's good, and it is good, it does not equal security. But the C-levels, whenever they get that report, they begin to believe that compliance must equal security because I have that report. Again, this is just wrong types of thinking. So going back to that timeline, if we begin to start to move our organizations from compliance focus to that business alignment, we're going to begin to start to realize some things. I believe that as a security leader, as security experts that we all are, the fact that you're at this conference today, you're a security expert because it's interesting to you. You're in that industry. I believe that it is our job to ensure company leaders begin to understand what compliance really is. It's a great framework, but it's the bare minimum. It's a stamp in time. We need to start moving our businesses to aligning ourselves with the business. Get the message to the board to stop looking at compliance as good enough, because it's not good enough. And we can prove that because story after story after story continues to hit the news. As security leaders, I believe this is our job. But there is some good news behind this. And this is something that I've learned as I've helped mature Schnucks' security posture. I've learned that as we begin to move that needle from a compliance-focused organization to a business-aligned organization, starting to understand our risks and starting to understand our threats better, we learned that our compliance efforts suddenly became very simple. Where compliance used to take us months and months to go through, now that we're focusing on risks and threats and aligning ourselves with the business, my compliance team, it's just very easy now because we're doing security. So the beneficial reality here is that while compliance does not equal security, security does equal compliance. And it's kind of an interesting concept because I'm not sure, I'm hoping that I'm making it make sense for you. Compliance does not equal security, but security can equal compliance. And so this was really the aha moment for me when I moved into the Schnucks role away from MasterCard and started to put in a framework that was risk and threat and moving towards business alignment. My aha moment was exactly this. We are now getting compliance done very quickly, and it's very naturally following what it is that we're doing as a security organization. And it's quite rewarding, to be quite honest with you. Compliance shouldn't be hard, and it's not hard if you're focusing on the right things. So here's my hope for the future of cybersecurity. I know that's a theme that we've heard a lot these last few days. My hope for the future of cybersecurity and where I want to kind of end my time with you this morning is as leaders, we all need to step up and appreciate the benefit of compliance, but not tolerate it as a security strategy any longer. I think given the continued headline reports, we all have an opportunity here to move that needle from compliance-focused security to business alignment. And there is benefit. Like I said, compliance is naturally going to be able to follow once we start doing that. Now, I can't ever say that that event won't happen again. But what I can say is that if we're moving that needle and we're investing in the right technologies and we're investing in the right strategy and the right people, we're moving that needle to understand our risks and our threats, what I can say is that I can deliver to the board and the CEO a framework that can detect if this is going to happen again. We have a plan in place that we can respond if it's going to happen again. And maybe best of yet, we have a plan in place where we can stop it early. What a better story to tell that only 1,000 credit cards left our system as opposed to 2.4 million. And if we can put a framework like that into place, we've truly started to win the cybersecurity battle against our adversaries. This is something that my team is focused on. I encourage you folks in the audience today, if your teams are focused on compliance, don't be down on yourself. You're doing good, but start to move that needle. And that's the message that you can begin to bring up to the leaders in your company. Compliance does not equal security, but security can equal compliance. Let's learn from the merchants of the past that continue to hit, Schnucks included, Home Depot, Target, the list goes on. Let's learn from them and not let it be us before we start thinking about changing things like that. Folks, that's really my time for today. I thank you for having me. I think we got a great session lined up. I would love to keep this dialogue open. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is malware. So if you liked everything I had to say, please find me on Twitter and we can continue to talk. If you didn't like what I said, you could find at Prince Harry or something. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.